The fluorescent lights in the conference room hummed steadily as Major Sarah Chen sat alone at the long oak table. Her uniform was pressed to perfection, her posture straight despite the exhaustion that tugged at her shoulders. She had been waiting for 20 minutes, and with each passing moment, the weight of what she was about to do pressed harder against her chest. At 34 years old, Sarah had served her country for 12 years. She had worked her way up through intelligence operations, earning respect through countless hours of careful analysis and strategic thinking. But respect, she had learned, was a fragile thing. It could be earned in private and dismissed in public with just a few careless words. The door opened and 3 men entered. Colonel Barnes led the way, his silver hair catching the light. Behind him came Lieutenant Colonel Foster and Captain Drummond. Sarah stood immediately, offering a crisp salute. "At ease, Major," Barnes said, settling into the chair across from her. The other 2 men flanked him, their expressions unreadable. Sarah sat back down, her hands folded neatly on the table. She had known Colonel Barnes for 5 years. He was a fair man, or so she had always believed. But the way he avoided her eyes now made something twist in her stomach. "I'll get right to it," Barnes began. "We have a situation that requires immediate attention. 6 months ago, we became aware of a security breach at Fort Hamilton. Classified information has been leaking to foreign entities. The leak is coming from inside the base." Sarah nodded slowly. Fort Hamilton was a small installation in upstate New York, primarily focused on training and logistics. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was critical infrastructure. "We need someone to go in undercover," Barnes continued. "Someone who can integrate into the community, gain trust, and identify the source of the leak. It's a long-term assignment, minimum 6 months, possibly longer." "I understand, sir," Sarah said. "What's my cover?" Barnes exchanged a glance with Foster. "That's where it gets complicated. The leak appears to be connected to civilian contractors working on base. We need someone who can move freely between military and civilian circles. Your cover would be as a recently discharged soldier dealing with PTSD and struggling to readjust to civilian life." Sarah felt her jaw tight. "You want me to pretend to be broken?" "We need you to be believable," Captain Drummond interjected. His voice was sharp, almost dismissive. "This isn't about ego, Major. This is about national security." Sarah turned her gaze to him. Drummond was younger than her, cocky, with a reputation for cutting corners. She had never liked him, and the feeling was clearly mutual. "I wasn't questioning the mission, Captain," Sarah said evenly. "I was clarifying the parameters." Barnes cleared his throat. "The truth is, Sarah, this mission requires someone who can be overlooked, someone people won't take too seriously at first glance. You'd be working part-time at a coffee shop near the base, living in a small apartment in town. You'd need to seem vulnerable, non-threatening." The words hung in the air like smoke. Sarah understood what he wasn't saying. They wanted her because she was a woman, because people would underestimate her, because she could play weak when she was anything but. "When would I deploy?" she asked. 2 weeks, Foster replied. "You go through a brief preparation period. New identity, background story, the usual protocols. But here's the thing, Major. This mission is classified at the highest level. You cannot tell anyone, not your family, not your friends. As far as the world is concerned, you're leaving the military and moving away to start fresh." Sarah's mother lived in Philadelphia, just 2 hours from where she was stationed. They talked every Sunday without fail. Her younger brother, David, was finishing medical school. They were close, the 3 of them. All they had left after her father passed away 8 years ago. "No contact?" she asked quietly. "Minimal contact," Barnes said. "You can call your mother occasionally, but you can't tell her where you are or what you're doing, and you can't visit. For this to work, you need to disappear completely from your old life." Sarah looked down at her hands. Her mother would worry. She would think something was wrong, that Sarah was struggling, maybe even falling apart, and Sarah wouldn't be able to tell her the truth. "I need to know you're committed to this," Barnes said, leaning forward. "Once you're in, you're in. There's no pulling out halfway through. The consequences of failure aren't just professional. If you're compromised, you could be killed." "I understand, sir," Drummond scoffed quietly. Sarah's eyes snapped to him. "Something funny, Captain?" "No, ma'am," he said, but his smirk remained. Just wondering if you've really thought this through. It's one thing to analyze intelligence from behind a desk. It's another to be out in the field alone with no backup. Captain Drummond, Barnes warned. But Drummond pressed on. I'm just saying maybe this mission requires someone with more field experience, someone who can handle themselves in high-pressure situations. Sarah felt heat rise in her chest, but she kept her voice level. I served 2 tours in Afghanistan, Captain. I've handled pressure. As an intelligence analyst, Drummond shot back, not as an operator. That's enough, Barnes said firmly. He turned back to Sarah. Major Chen has an exemplary record. She's the right person for this mission. But Sarah could see the doubt in Foster's eyes. She could feel the weight of their skepticism. They needed her, but they didn't fully believe in her. She was convenient, expendable maybe. I'll do it, Sarah said. I volunteer, Barnes nodded slowly. Good, report to Building 7 tomorrow at 0800. They'll start your prep work. Sarah stood, saluted, and left the room. As the door closed behind her, she heard Drummond's voice, muffled but clear enough. This is a mistake. She's going to get herself killed, or worse, blow the entire operation. Sarah kept walking. She had heard worse. She had proven herself over and over again, and still, there were men like Drummond who saw her as less than. But this mission wasn't about proving anything to him. It was about protecting her country and finding a traitor. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur. Sarah learned her new identity inside and out. She was now Sarah Mitchell, 32, honorably discharged from the Army after 8 years of service. She had been a logistics specialist, nothing glamorous. The official story was that she had developed severe anxiety and depression after her last deployment and had been medically discharged. The backstory made her skin crawl. She had known too many real soldiers who struggled with PTSD, who fought invisible battles every day. Using their pain as a cover felt wrong, but she understood the necessity. She practiced her new mannerisms, less confident posture, quieter voice, a tendency to zone out mid-conversation. She studied the symptoms of PTSD not from clinical text but from interviews with veterans. She learned how to seem fragile without overacting. The hardest part was calling her mother. Sarah sat in her quarters on a Tuesday evening, phone in hand, rehearsing what she would say. Finally, she dialed. Sarah, oh honey, it's so good to hear your voice. Her mother's warmth flooded through the phone and Sarah felt her throat tight. Hi, Mom. You sound tired, sweetheart. Are they working you too hard? Sarah closed her eyes. Actually, Mom, I need to tell you something. I'm leaving the Army. Silence. Then carefully, leaving? What do you mean? I'm being discharged, medical reasons. The lies tasted bitter. I've been having a hard time lately. Anxiety, mostly. The doctors think it's best if I take some time away from military life. Oh, Sarah. Her mother's voice cracked. Why didn't you tell me you were struggling? I could have helped. You could have come home. I know, Mom. I needed to handle it on my own first, but I'm going to be okay. I'm moving to a small town, somewhere quiet. I need time to figure things out. Where? I'll come visit, or you can stay with me until you're feeling better. I can't tell you where yet. I need to do this alone, Mom. Please understand. Sarah, you're scaring me. I'm going to be fine, Sarah said, forcing strength into her voice even as her heart broke. I promise. I'll call you when I can, but I need you to trust me, okay? Her mother was crying now, soft sobs that cut deeper than any physical wound Sarah had ever endured. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. Please be safe. Sarah ended the call and sat in the darkness of her room, letting tears slide silently down her cheeks. This was the cost of service that nobody talked about. The sacrifice wasn't just putting your life on the line. It was lying to the people you loved most. It was letting them worry and hurt because the truth would put them in danger. 3 days later, Sarah Chen ceased to exist. In her place, Sarah Mitchell arrived in the small town of Ridgemont, New York, population 8,000. Ridgemont was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. Main Street had a hardware store, a diner, a grocery store, and a coffee shop called Brewed Awakenings. The coffee shop was owned by a woman named Margaret Wells, 58, widowed, with a reputation for kindness and a talent for remembering everyone's order. Sarah's apartment was on the second floor of an old Victorian house that had been converted into 3 units. It was small, just a bedroom, bathroom, and a combination kitchen and living area. The furniture was worn but clean. A window overlooked the street, where maple trees were just beginning to bud with the arrival of spring. She unpacked her meager belongings. Civilian clothes, mostly jeans and plain shirts, a few books, a laptop that looked ordinary but was equipped with encrypted communication software that would allow her to send reports back to headquarters. She had one photo in a frame, a picture of her with her mother and brother from 2 years ago. They were at the beach, all smiling, the sun bright behind them. Sarah placed the photo on the small table beside her bed and turned away before the ache in her chest could overwhelm her. The next morning, she walked to Brood Awakenings for her interview. Margaret was behind the counter, wiping down the espresso machine when Sarah entered. The older woman looked up with a smile that seemed genuine. "You must be Sarah. Come in, come in. Want some coffee? It's on the house." "Thank you," Sarah said softly. She had practiced her new demeanor until it felt almost natural. Shoulders slightly hunched, eyes that didn't quite meet others directly, a small, uncertain smile. Margaret poured 2 cups and gestured to a table by the window. They sat and Margaret studied Sarah with kind but perceptive eyes. "So you're new to Ridgemont," Margaret said. "What brings you to our little town?" "I needed a change," Sarah replied. "I was in the army for a while, logistics, but I had to leave. Medical discharge. I just needed somewhere quiet to figure things out." Margaret's expression softened with understanding. "My late husband was Army. I know it can be hard to adjust. Well, you've come to the right place. Ridgemont's about as quiet as it gets, and I could use the help here. Morning shift mostly, 6 to noon. Think you can handle that?" "Yes, ma'am." "None of that ma'am stuff. It's Margaret." She reached across and patted Sarah's hand. "You'll do just fine here, honey. When can you start?" "Whenever you need me." "How about tomorrow?" Sarah nodded. "Thank you, Margaret, really." As she left the coffee shop, Sarah felt the first flutter of guilt. Margaret was kind, genuine, and Sarah was lying to her with every word. But this was the job. This was what she had volunteered for. The first week was an exercise in patience. Sarah learned the rhythms of the coffee shop, the regulars who came in every morning, the small talk that was expected. She smiled and nodded and played her part. There was Tom Rodriguez, a contractor who worked on base, always ordered a large black coffee and a blueberry muffin. He was friendly, early 40s, married with 2 kids whose photos he showed to anyone who would look. There was Rachel Pims, a teacher at the local elementary school, who came in every day at 7:30 for a latte and often graded papers at a corner table. And there was Frank Morrison, retired Army, who sat at the counter every morning and told stories about the old days. He took an immediate dislike to Sarah. "Another one of those sensitive types," he muttered to Margaret one morning when Sarah was working the espresso machine. "In my day, soldiers toughened up. They didn't run away crying." Sarah's jaw clenched, but she kept her eyes on her work. Margaret shot Frank a disapproving look. "Frank, that's enough. I'm just saying, the military's gone soft, probably why we've got problems." Sarah turned, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'm sorry you feel that way, sir." Frank snorted. "Don't apologize, just proves my point. No backbone." Sarah forced herself to look away, to let her shoulders sag as if his words had wounded her. Inside, she was cataloging everything. Frank Morrison, retired Army, bitter, opinionated, possibly resentful enough to betray his former brothers in arms, or just an old man stuck in the past. Margaret intervened, steering the conversation away, but Sarah felt Frank's eyes on her for the rest of the morning. Suspicious. Dismissive. That night, Sarah sent her first report. She detailed the people she had met, the layout of the town, the contractors she had identified who worked on base. The message was encrypted and sent through a secure channel. She received no response as expected. Until she had something solid, she was on her own. Weeks turned into a month. Sarah settled into her role. She became a familiar face in Ridgemont, the quiet veteran who kept to herself but was always polite. People started to relax around her, to forget she was there. That was when she started to see the patterns. Tom Rodriguez, the contractor, met with a man Sarah didn't recognize every Thursday afternoon at the diner. They sat in the back booth, spoke in low voices, and always paid in cash. The man was well dressed, out of place in Ridgemont's casual atmosphere. Rachel Pims, the teacher, received phone calls that made her step outside, her voice tense when she thought no one was listening. And Frank Morrison, for all his bluster about military honor, spent an unusual amount of time at the library using the public computers. Sarah watched, listened, took mental notes. She couldn't approach any of them directly. She had to wait for them to reveal themselves. One evening, as she was closing up the coffee shop, Tom Rodriguez came in. He looked nervous, glancing over his shoulder before approaching the counter. "Hey, Sarah, right? That's me. What can I get you?" "We're about to close, but I can make something quick." No, I wanted to talk to you. You seem like someone who understands what it's like, being a veteran." Sarah's instincts sharpened, but she kept her expression open, curious. "Sure, what's on your mind?" Tom hesitated. "It's probably nothing, but I've been seeing some weird stuff at work, on base, and I don't know who to talk to about it." Sarah's heart rate increased, but she kept her voice calm. "What kind of weird stuff?" "Files that shouldn't be accessible showing up in places they shouldn't be. Conversations that get cut off when I walk into a room. I'm just a contractor. I do my job, I go home, but something feels off." "Have you reported it to anyone?" Tom laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Report it to who?" "The same people who might be involved. I'm not trying to lose my job or worse. I thought maybe you'd understand. Sometimes you see things and you can't unsee them." Sarah nodded slowly. "I do understand, but Tom, if something's really wrong, you have to tell someone in authority." "Yeah," Tom said, but he didn't sound convinced. "Yeah, maybe you're right." He turned to leave, then stopped. "Hey, Sarah, be careful, okay? This town, it's not as simple as it looks." After he left, Sarah stood in the empty coffee shop, her mind racing. Tom knew something. But was he part of the leak, or had he stumbled onto it? She needed more information. She sent an updated report that night, flagging Tom Rodriguez as a person of interest. The response came within hours, unusual and urgent. "Maintain cover. Continue observation. Do not engage directly. Rodriguez is clean. Repeat, Rodriguez is clean. He may be a liability if he keeps asking questions." Sarah stared at the message. If Tom was clean and he was noticing problems, that meant the leak was significant enough to be obvious to someone paying attention. It also meant Tom might be in danger. 2 days later, Tom didn't come in for his morning coffee. Margaret commented on it, worry in her voice. "That's not like him. Tom's been coming here every weekday for 3 years." Sarah felt a cold knot form in her stomach. That afternoon, she walked past Tom's house, a modest ranch on Elm Street. His car was in the driveway. The curtains were drawn. Everything looked normal, but something felt wrong. She couldn't knock on the door. She couldn't draw attention to herself. All she could do was wait and watch. The next morning, police cars were parked outside Tom's house. Sarah heard the news from a customer before she even got to work. Tom Rodriguez had been found dead in his home. Carbon monoxide poisoning. His furnace had malfunctioned. Margaret was devastated. The whole town was shaken. Sarah felt sick. She didn't believe in coincidences, not in her line of work. Tom had asked questions. Tom had noticed things, and now Tom was dead. Sarah sent an emergency report. The response was cold and clinical. "Continue mission. Do not deviate from cover. You are safe as long as you remain passive." But Sarah didn't feel safe, and she was tired of being passive. That night she went to the library. Frank Morrison was there, as he often was, hunched over a computer in the back. Sarah took a seat at a nearby table with a book, watching him from the corner of her eye. Frank typed rapidly, his eyes darting to the door every few minutes. He was nervous. After 20 minutes he printed something, folded the pages quickly, and left. Sarah waited 30 seconds, then followed at a distance. Frank walked 3 blocks to a small park. A car was waiting, engine running. Frank approached the passenger window, handed over the papers, and received an envelope in return. Sarah memorized the license plate. Her phone was in her pocket, equipped with a camera, but she couldn't risk taking a photo. Not here, not now. The car drove away. Frank stood there for a moment, clutching the envelope before walking home. Sarah returned to her apartment, her mind spinning. Frank Morrison, a bitter, angry, retired soldier who felt the army had forgotten him. The perfect target for recruitment. Someone who had access, knowledge, and resentment. She sent her report, including the license plate. The response came within an hour. "Vehicle registered to known foreign intelligence operative. Stand by for extraction orders." But the extraction orders didn't come. Days passed. Sarah continued her routine, serving coffee, smiling, playing her part. But now she knew. Frank Morrison was the leak, or at least one of them. And then everything went wrong. Sarah was walking home from work on a Wednesday evening when a car pulled up beside her. Two men got out dressed in civilian clothes but moving with military precision. One of them flashed a badge too quickly for her to read. "Sarah Mitchell, we need you to come with us, we have some questions." Sarah's training kicked in. She assessed her options. Run, fight. Neither would help her cover story. "Questions about what?" she asked, keeping her voice uncertain, afraid. "About Tom Rodriguez. You were one of the last people to see him alive. We just want to talk." They weren't local police. Sarah could tell from their bearing, from the way they positioned themselves to block her escape routes. These were professionals, but working for whom? "Okay," she said quietly. "Am I in trouble? That depends on what you tell us." They put her in the back of the car. No handcuffs, but no illusions about her freedom either. They drove out of town onto back roads that led nowhere. Sarah's heart hammered, but she kept her breathing steady. She had been in worse situations. She could handle this. The car stopped at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. They led her inside to a room with a single chair and a bright light overhead. Classic interrogation setup. They were trying to scare her. The first man, tall with cold eyes, circled her slowly. "Sarah Mitchell, 32, discharged from the Army, PTSD, working at a coffee shop. Seems like a simple life." "It is," Sarah said, letting her voice shake slightly. "Except you've been very curious lately, watching people, asking questions." "That's not very simple. I don't know what you're talking about." The second man, shorter but more muscular, leaned in close. "Tom Rodriguez came to you. What did he tell you?" "Nothing. He just wanted to talk. He seemed stressed. And then he died. Convenient." Sarah looked up, letting confusion and fear show on her face. "Are you saying I had something to do with that?" I barely knew him." The tall man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We know who you are, Major Chen. Or should I say Sarah Mitchell, clever cover but not clever enough." Sarah's blood ran cold. They knew her cover was blown. "I think you have me confused with someone else," she said, but her voice lacked conviction now. "Do we?" The tall man produced a folder, dropped it on the table beside her. Inside were photos of her in uniform, her service record, everything. "So here's what's going to happen," he continued. "You're going to tell us everything about your mission. Who sent you, what you know, and what you've reported, and then we're going to decide what to do with you." Sarah's mind raced. These men weren't supposed to know about her, which meant either they had a source inside military intelligence or her cover had been compromised from the start. Either way, she was in serious trouble. "I want to call my commanding officer," Sarah said. The tall man laughed. "I'm sure you do, but that's not going to happen. See, Major, you've stumbled into something much bigger than a simple intelligence leak, and now you're a liability." The shorter man pulled out a gun, placed it on the table, not pointing at her, but the threat was clear. Sarah's training had prepared her for this. She knew how to resist interrogation, but her training had always assumed she would have backup, that someone would come for her. Now, sitting in that cold warehouse, Sarah realized she was completely alone. And part one of her story was far from over. The tall man leaned against the wall, arms crossed, studying her like a scientist examining a specimen. "You know what I find interesting, Major? You volunteered for this mission. You wanted to prove something, maybe to your colleagues who doubted you, maybe to yourself. But heroics only work if someone knows what you did." Sarah remained silent. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of a response. "No one knows you're here," he continued. "Your handlers think you're safely tucked away in your apartment. Your mother thinks you're off finding yourself. You're a ghost, Major Chen, and ghosts can disappear without a trace." The shorter man checked his watch. "We don't have all night." "Patience, Victor," the Major is thinking, calculating her odds, wondering if she can fight her way out or if she should cooperate. The tall man smiled. "Let me save you some time, Major. You can't fight your way out, and cooperation is your only option." Sarah's eyes flickered to the gun on the table, then to the door. Two armed men, one exit, and she was pretending to be a fragile veteran with PTSD. If she suddenly turned into a trained operative, she would confirm everything they suspected. But if she didn't act, she might not leave this building alive. "I really don't know what you want from me," Sarah said, keeping her voice small. "I'm just trying to start over. Why are you doing this?" The tall man's smile faded. "Still playing the victim. Fine. We'll do this the hard way." He nodded to Victor, who moved behind Sarah's chair. She tensed, ready to move, but Victor simply pulled out a phone and held it up so she could see the screen, her mother's house. The live video feed showed her mother in the kitchen washing dishes, completely unaware she was being watched. Sarah's blood turned to ice. "Beautiful home," the tall man said conversationally. "Nice neighborhood. Shame if something happened to it." "You wouldn't," Sarah breathed, all pretense dropping from her voice. "Wouldn't I? Major, you're investigating a network that moves millions of dollars in classified information. Do you really think we have qualms about eliminating obstacles? Tom Rodriguez learned that lesson, so can your family." Sarah's fists clenched. This was the line. Threaten her, hurt her, even kill her, but leave her family out of it. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice steady now, the mask falling away. "There it is," the tall man said with satisfaction. "The real Major Chen. What we want is simple. You're going to continue your mission exactly as planned, but now you work for us. Every report you send back to your handlers you'll share with us first. Every piece of intelligence you gather will know about it. You want me to be a double agent. Smart and pretty. Yes, Major. You'll feed your people just enough to keep them happy while feeding us everything of real value. In return, your mother lives. Your brother finishes medical school. Everyone stays safe." Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. If she agreed, she betrayed her country. If she refused, they would kill her family. There had to be a third option, but she couldn't see it yet. "How do I know you won't hurt them anyway?" "You don't, but you know for certain what happens if you refuse. At least this way they have a chance." It was a trap. Every instinct screamed at her to fight, to resist. But the image of her mother on that screen, innocent and vulnerable, paralyzed her. "I need time to think," Sarah said. "You have 10 seconds. "That's not enough." 10, 9, 8. Sarah's heart pounded. Think, there had to be a way out. 7, 6, 5. The gun was still on the table if she could reach it. 4, 3, 2. "Wait," Sarah shouted. "Wait, I'll do it. I'll work for you." The tall man smiled. "Smart choice. Victor, show the Major our appreciation." Victor put away the phone and produced a burner cell. "You'll use this to contact us. There's one number programmed. You report to us before you report to your handlers. Miss a check-in and we pay your mother a visit. Understand?" Sarah took the phone, her hands shaking, not with fear but with barely controlled rage. "I understand." "Good. Now let's discuss what you've learned so far. Start with Frank Morrison." So they knew she had identified Frank, which meant they had been watching her just as carefully as she had been watching everyone else. This operation was more compromised than she had imagined. Sarah told them about Frank's meetings, the license plate, the exchange in the park. She gave them enough to seem cooperative while holding back the details that might still matter. It was a delicate balance, but she had been trained for this. When she finished, the tall man nodded approvingly. "Very good. Continue monitoring Frank, but don't interfere. We'll let you know when we need you to take action." "Who are you people?" Sarah asked. "Who are you working for?" "That's above your pay grade, Major. All you need to know is that we're everywhere. In the military, in government, in places you would never suspect. That's how we've stayed ahead for so long." They drove her back to town and dropped her off 3 blocks from her apartment. As the car disappeared into the night, Sarah stood on the empty street, clutching the burner phone, feeling the weight of impossible choices pressing down on her. She couldn't go to her handlers. If this network was as embedded as they claimed, reporting the contact might trigger retaliation against her family before help could arrive. She couldn't run. They were watching her mother, probably watching her brother too, and she couldn't do nothing. American lives depended on the intelligence these people were stealing. Sarah walked back to her apartment in the darkness, her mind working through scenarios. There had to be a way to turn this situation around. She just had to find it. When she got home, she found an envelope under her door. Inside was a single photograph, her mother and brother having lunch together at a cafe. The message was clear: "We can reach them anytime." Sarah sat on her bed, the photo in her hands, and for the first time since this mission started, she felt truly alone. Not just isolated from her support system, but alone in a way that made her question everything she thought she knew about strength and duty. She had volunteered for this mission to prove she was capable, to show that she could handle the pressure, the isolation, the danger. But she had never anticipated this. They had trained her to resist torture, to withstand interrogation. They had never trained her how to choose between betraying her country and protecting her family. Sarah looked at the photo of herself with her mother and brother that sat on her bedside table. 3 people who loved each other, smiling in the sunshine, unaware of the darkness that was coming. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered to the photo. "I'm so sorry." But sorry wouldn't save them, only action would. And right now Sarah had no idea what action to take. She lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, planning and discarding strategies. By dawn, she had the beginning of an idea. It was dangerous. It might get her killed, but it was the only path she could see that didn't end in complete disaster. The next morning, Sarah went to work as usual. She smiled at customers, made coffee, and played her part. But now she was playing 2 parts, the fragile veteran and the trapped operative. The performance required every ounce of concentration. Margaret noticed something was off. "You okay, honey? You seem distracted." "Just didn't sleep well," Sarah said, which was true enough. "You're working too hard. Why don't you take tomorrow off, get some rest?" Sarah shook her head. "I'm fine, really." But she wasn't fine. She was barely holding herself together, and as the day wore on, that became harder and harder to hide. That evening, Frank Morrison came into the coffee shop just before closing. Sarah was alone, wiping down tables. Frank sat at the counter and studied her with those sharp, suspicious eyes. "You're different," he said finally. Sarah's heart skipped. "Excuse me. When you first came to town, you had that look, that lost, scared look, but it's gone now. Now you look like a soldier again." Sarah forced a laugh. "I think you're imagining things, Frank. Maybe, or maybe I'm just old and observant." He leaned forward. "What are you really doing here, Sarah Mitchell?" Sarah met his eyes. This was a test. Frank was either part of the network testing her loyalty, or he suspected something and was fishing for information. "I'm making coffee and trying to move on with my life," Sarah said evenly. "Same as I've been doing since I got here." Frank studied her for a long moment, then stood. "If you say so, but a word of advice from one veteran to another. In this town, trust no one, not even the people who seem kind." He left without ordering anything. Sarah watched him go, her instincts screaming. Frank knew something, but how much? And why warn her unless he was trying to help? The pieces started clicking into place. Frank's bitterness wasn't directed at the military itself. It was directed at the people who had betrayed it. His meetings, his caution, his angry outbursts about the military going soft. It wasn't resentment. It was a cover, just like hers. Frank Morrison wasn't the leak. Frank Morrison was investigating the leak, which meant Sarah might not be as alone as she thought. But it also meant Frank was in just as much danger as she was. Maybe more if the network suspected him. Sarah locked up the coffee shop and walked home through streets that suddenly felt less like a small town and more like a battlefield. Every shadow could hide an enemy. Every friendly face could mask a threat. When she reached her apartment, she found the burner phone blinking with a new message. "Report, now." Sarah sat down and typed out a minimal update. Nothing that would compromise her real mission, but enough to satisfy her captors. She hit send and waited. The response came immediately. "Good, continue as instructed." Sarah deleted the messages and hid the phone. Then she pulled out her laptop and began composing a coded report to her actual handlers. She couldn't tell them directly about the compromise. They might panic and pull her out, leaving her family vulnerable. Instead, she embedded a warning in routine observations, using phrases that would signal distress to anyone trained to look for them. It was a long shot, but it was all she had. Over the next few days, Sarah walked a tightrope. She maintained her cover as the struggling veteran. She sent carefully crafted reports to both the network and her handlers, and she watched Frank Morrison with new eyes. Frank was careful. He varied his routines, used different computers at the library, and never met the same person twice in the same location. But Sarah could see the pattern now. He was building a case just like she was. She wanted to approach him, to tell him she was on his side. But that would expose both of them. If Frank was under surveillance too, any contact between them would raise red flags. So Sarah waited, watched, and planned. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Rachel Pims, the elementary school teacher, came into the coffee shop one morning looking exhausted. She ordered a triple espresso, which was unusual for her. "Rough night?" Sarah asked sympathetically. Rachel laughed bitterly. "You could say that, family drama, my brother's in trouble, again." "I'm sorry to hear that," He never learns, always getting mixed up with the wrong people, making stupid choices. Rachel looked up suddenly, as if realizing she had said too much. Sorry, you don't need to hear about my problems. It's okay, Sarah said gently. We all have family stuff. Rachel smiled weakly and took her coffee to a corner table, but Sarah had caught something in her tone, fear and guilt. That night Sarah did some digging. Rachel Pims had a younger brother, Danny, who had a record. Petty theft, drug charges, nothing major, but enough to make him vulnerable. Enough to make Rachel do things she wouldn't normally do to protect him. Sarah sent a coded message to her handlers. Secondary target identified. Teacher. Coerced participant, not true believer. Possible leverage point. If she could flip Rachel, turn her into an asset instead of a liability, maybe, just maybe, she could start to unravel this network without getting her family killed. But time was running out. The network was getting nervous. Sarah could feel it in the way Victor watched her during their brief check-ins, in the pointed questions they asked about her reports. They were testing her loyalty, and sooner or later they would demand something she couldn't give them. Something that would force her to choose between her duty and her family. Sarah lay in bed that night, listening to the sounds of Ridgemont settling down for the evening. Somewhere in this town, people were living normal lives, going to work, raising children, never knowing that beneath the surface, a war was being fought. And Sarah was right in the middle of it, with no backup, no support, and no guarantee she would survive. But she was still standing, still fighting, because that was what soldiers did. They didn't give up even when everything seemed hopeless. Sarah closed her eyes and thought about her mother, about her brother, about Tom Rodriguez, who had died because he asked questions, about Frank Morrison fighting his own lonely battle, and she made a decision. She was done being passive, done waiting for someone else to save her. If she was going to go down, she would go down fighting, on her terms, with her honor intact. Tomorrow she would set her plan in motion. Tomorrow she would stop being the prey and become the hunter. But tonight, in the darkness of her small apartment, Sarah Chen allowed herself one moment of weakness, one moment to be afraid, to doubt, to wish things were different. Then she locked that weakness away, buried it deep where it couldn't touch her, and began to prepare for the battle ahead, because she had volunteered for this mission. She had known the risks, and she would see it through to the end, whatever that end might be. Morning arrived with the kind of pale spring light that made everything look gentle and innocent. Sarah stood at her window, watching Ridgemont wake up, and thought about how deceptive appearances could be. Today, everything would change. She just had to survive it. Sarah dressed carefully in civilian clothes, jeans, a plain gray sweater, comfortable shoes she could run in if necessary. She tucked the burner phone into her pocket and her official encrypted phone into her jacket. Both would play their roles today. At Brood Awakenings, Margaret was already opening up, humming to herself as she arranged the pastries in the display case. She smiled when Sarah walked in. "You're early, I like that. Want some breakfast before we open?" "No, thank you, I'm not very hungry." Margaret's smile faded slightly. "You sure you're okay, honey? You've seemed off lately." Sarah forced a smile. "I'm fine, just adjusting, it takes time." "Well, you let me know if you need anything at all." The kindness in Margaret's voice made Sarah's chest ache. Margaret didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of this. None of these people did. The morning rush started, and Sarah threw herself into the rhythm of making coffee, taking orders, and maintaining her cover. But her attention was split, tracking everyone who came and went. Frank Morrison arrived at 8 o'clock, right on schedule. He took his usual spot at the counter but didn't order his usual coffee. Instead, he asked for tea. Earl Grey, hot. Sarah's hands stilled for just a moment. Earl Grey was not a drink Frank had ever ordered in the 6 weeks she had been working here. It was a signal. She was certain of it. She prepared the tea and set it in front of him, meeting his eyes briefly. Frank gave the slightest nod, then turned his attention to his newspaper. Underneath the newspaper, Sarah glimpsed the edge of a white envelope. Her heart rate increased, but she kept her expression neutral. Margaret was in the back, sorting supplies. Sarah wiped down the counter, moving closer to Frank. "Refill?" she asked quietly. "Not yet." Frank didn't look up from his paper, but his voice was low and urgent. "Blue sedan outside, watching you for the past 3 days." Sarah didn't turn to look. "I know, you're compromised." "I know that too." Frank finally met her eyes. "Then why are you still here?" "Because I don't run." Something shifted in Frank's expression. Respect maybe, or recognition. They have something on you. It wasn't a question. Sarah gave the barest nod. Frank folded his newspaper deliberately, leaving the envelope visible. That contains everything I've gathered in the past 8 months. Names, dates, transactions. It's enough to bring down the network, but if I try to send it up the chain, it'll get intercepted. They've got people everywhere. Then what do you suggest? You take it, but not to your handlers. Take it to the Inspector General's office in Washington. Hand-deliver it to Colonel Patricia Hayes. Only her, she's clean. And you? Frank's smile was grim. I'll be making sure that blue sedan follows me instead of you. I'm old, Major. I've had my time. You still have a mission to complete. I'm not letting you sacrifice yourself. It's not your choice. Frank stood, leaving cash on the counter and the envelope beside his cup. They'll come for this location soon. Margaret's in danger just being near you. Get her out. Get yourself out. And finish what we started. Before Sarah could respond, Frank walked out of the coffee shop. Through the window, she watched him get into his truck and drive away. The blue sedan immediately pulled out to follow him. Sarah's hands trembled as she picked up the envelope. It was thin, innocuous looking, but the weight of it felt enormous. Margaret emerged from the back. Was that Frank? He didn't finish his tea. He had to leave, Sarah said. Her mind was racing. Frank was right. This location was compromised. Margaret was in danger, and Sarah had minutes, maybe less, to act. Margaret, Sarah said carefully, do you trust me? Margaret blinked, surprised by the question. Of course, honey, why? Then I need you to do exactly what I say. Right now, close the shop. Tell people there's a gas leak or a problem with the plumbing. Lock the doors and go home. Don't come back here until you hear from the police that it's safe. Margaret's face went pale. Sarah, what's going on? I can't explain, but please trust me. You're in danger if you stay here. For a long moment, Margaret just stared at her. Then slowly she nodded. Okay, I'll close up, but Sarah, what about you? I'll be fine, I promise, just go, now. Margaret moved quickly, flipping the sign to closed and ushering the few customers out with apologetic explanations. Sarah watched through the window as Margaret locked the door and hurried to her car. The moment Margaret drove away, Sarah moved. She grabbed her jacket, tucked the envelope inside, and slipped out the back entrance into the alley. Her official phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We know what you're planning. Give us the envelope and your family lives. Run and they die. Sarah's blood went cold. They were monitoring her official phone, which meant they had access to military communications. The compromise went deeper than even Frank had realized. She pulled out the burner phone and typed a quick message. I have the envelope. Let's meet, you can have it. The response came immediately. Park, East Side, 20 minutes, come alone. Sarah deleted the messages and dropped the burner phone down a storm drain. Then she pulled the battery from her official phone and dumped both pieces in a trash can. They wanted her to come alone. They wanted the envelope. And they would kill her the moment they had it. But Sarah had no intention of playing by their rules anymore. She had 20 minutes. Not much time, but enough if she was smart. Sarah ran through back alleys and side streets, avoiding main roads where cameras might track her. She knew Ridgemont's layout now, knew every shortcut and hiding spot. Her destination was the library. It was public, well lit, and most importantly, it had multiple exits and a security system that recorded everything. Inside, Sarah found an unoccupied computer in the back. She created a new email account using a random name generator, then carefully photographed every page of Frank's envelope with the library's scanner. The documents were damning. Account numbers, communications intercepts, travel records. Frank had been meticulous. Sarah uploaded everything to a secure cloud server with instructions to automatically send copies to multiple recipients if she didn't check in within 24 hours. The recipients included the Inspector General's office, the FBI, and 3 journalists she had researched as having impeccable integrity. It was a dead man's switch. If they killed her, the truth would still come out. Next, she drafted an email to Colonel Patricia Hayes explaining everything. The mission, the compromise, the network, Frank's sacrifice. She scheduled it to send in 1 hour, giving herself time to either cancel it if she survived or ensure it went through if she didn't. Finally, Sarah sent a message to her mother through a public messaging system. carefully worded to seem innocuous but containing coded phrases they had agreed on years ago for emergencies. "Mom, remember our conversation about the summer cabin? I think it's time to take that vacation we talked about. Call David and go today. Don't wait. Love you." Her mother would understand. She would take David and disappear for a while somewhere safe until this was over. Sarah checked the time. 15 minutes had passed. She had 5 minutes to get to the park. She grabbed a library laptop bag from a donation bin, stuffed it with random papers to approximate the envelope's weight, and ran. The park was on the east side of Ridgemont, a small green space with a playground, walking paths, and a parking lot. Sarah approached from the south, staying in the tree line, watching. The blue sedan was there. So was a black SUV. 4 men that Sarah could see, all wearing civilian clothes but standing with military bearing. Victor was among them, scanning the area. Sarah's hands clenched on the bag, 4 against 1. Not good odds, but she had faced worse. She stepped out of the tree line and walked toward them, keeping her pace steady, her shoulders squared. No more pretending to be broken. If this was going to be her last fight, she would face it as herself. Victor spotted her and smiled. "Major Chen, right on time. Do you have the envelope?" "I have it." Sarah stopped 20 feet away, maintaining distance. "But first I need proof my family is safe." "You're not in a position to negotiate." "Actually, I am." Sarah held up the bag. "Because if anything happens to me, copies of everything in this envelope get sent to the Inspector General, the FBI, and the Washington Post. Your whole network gets exposed." Victor's smile disappeared. He gestured, and one of the other men raised a gun, pointing it directly at Sarah. "Give us the envelope now, or I'll shoot you right here." "Go ahead," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "The documents are already uploaded to a secure server with a dead man switch. You kill me, they get released automatically. Your only option is to let me walk away." "You're bluffing." "Am I? Frank Morrison spent 8 months building this case. Do you really think he would trust a single physical copy?" "That I would." Victor's jaw clenched. He was calculating, weighing his options. Sarah could see the moment doubt crept in. "Even if that's true," Victor said slowly, "we still have leverage. Your family is already gone. I warned them. By now they're somewhere you can't reach them." This was partly a bluff. Sarah had no way to confirm her mother had received the message and acted on it. But she said it with such confidence that Victor hesitated. "So here's how this is going to work," Sarah continued. "I walk away, you let me, and in exchange I don't release the documents immediately. You get 24 hours to run, disappear, whatever you need to do. After that, everything goes public. And why would you give us that courtesy? Because I want you gone more than I want you in prison. You get to live. I get my family's safety. Everyone walks away." It was a lie, of course. Sarah had already set the documents to release. But Victor didn't know that. Victor studied her for a long moment, then he lowered the gun slightly. "You've got guts, Major, I'll give you that, but you're making a mistake. This network is bigger than you can imagine. Taking us down won't change anything. There will always be someone willing to sell secrets." "Maybe, but it won't be you." Victor laughed, a harsh sound. "Fine, you want to play hero, go ahead, but don't think this is over. We have long memories, Major Chen, and we're patient." "So am I," Sarah said. She turned and walked away, every instinct screaming at her to run, to look back, to expect a bullet. But she forced herself to maintain a steady pace, projecting confidence she didn't feel. Behind her she heard car doors slam. Engines started. The vehicles drove away. Sarah made it to the tree line before her legs gave out. She collapsed against a trunk, gasping, the adrenaline finally catching up to her. She had done it. She had walked into a trap and walked back out. But the battle wasn't over. Not yet. Sarah pulled herself together and ran back to the library. She canceled the delayed email to Colonel Hayes and sent it immediately instead, along with all the supporting documents. Then she made copies of everything and mailed them to the addresses Frank had specified. The dead man's switch would still trigger in 24 hours unless she disabled it, but Sarah left it active. Insurance, in case the network tried something. Next, she called 911 from a library phone. "There's been suspicious activity at the park on East Main. Multiple armed individuals. They just left, but I think you should check it out." She hung up before they could ask questions. It would bring police attention to the area, create a record of the meeting, make it harder for the network to operate. Finally, Sarah allowed herself to check her personal messages. There was a response from her mother, coded but clear. Already packing. We'll call when we arrive. Stay safe, baby. Relief flooded through Sarah, so intense it brought tears to her eyes. Her mother was safe. David was safe. They had listened. Now Sarah just had to finish the mission. She spent the next 3 hours in the library, using public computers to compile a detailed report of everything that had happened. Every name, every face, every interaction. She cross-referenced Frank's documents with her own observations, building a complete picture of the network's operations. By the time she finished, the sun was setting. Sarah's hands ached from typing and her eyes burned from staring at screens. But the work was done. She uploaded the final report to multiple secure locations, then destroyed her access trails as thoroughly as possible. When she stepped out of the library, the street was dark and quiet. Sarah walked back toward her apartment, hyper-aware of every sound, every shadow, but no one followed her. The network had taken her at her word and run, or they were waiting for a better opportunity. Sarah packed quickly. She couldn't stay in Ridgemont. Her cover was blown, her apartment compromised. She stuffed clothes into a duffel bag, grabbed the photo of her family, and left everything else. As she locked the apartment door one last time, Margaret's voice called out from downstairs. "Sarah." "Is that you?" Sarah's heart sank. She descended the stairs slowly. Margaret stood in the entryway, her face lined with worry. "I told you to stay away," Sarah said quietly. "I know, but I couldn't just leave you. You're in trouble, aren't you? Real trouble." Sarah wanted to lie to protect Margaret from the truth, but she was so tired of lying. "Yes," she admitted. "But it's over now. I'm leaving town. You should forget you ever knew me." Margaret stepped closer, and to Sarah's surprise, she reached out and took her hand. "I don't know what you're involved in," Margaret said, "and I don't need to know, but I've lived long enough to recognize a good person when I see one. Whatever you did, whatever happens next, you did it for the right reasons. I believe that." Sarah's throat tightened. "Thank you, Margaret, for everything, for being kind when you didn't have to be. Where will you go?" "I can't tell you that, but I'll be okay." Margaret pulled Sarah into a hug, brief but warm. "Take care of yourself, honey." Then she was gone, walking back to her car, leaving Sarah standing alone in the darkness. Sarah got into her own car, a nondescript sedan she had leased under her cover identity. She drove out of Ridgemont without looking back, watching the small town disappear in her rearview mirror. She drove for 3 hours before stopping at a motel off the highway. It was the kind of place that took cash and didn't ask questions. Sarah paid for a room, locked the door, and finally allowed herself to collapse. She had survived. Against all odds, she had survived, but the cost was high. Tom Rodriguez was dead. Frank Morrison was in the wind, probably in hiding like her. Sarah's career was effectively over. She couldn't return to her old life without putting everyone in danger. And the network was still out there, wounded but not destroyed. Sarah lay on the lumpy motel bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, and wondered if she had made the right choices. Wondered if the sacrifice had been worth it. Her phone rang. Not the burner phone, which was at the bottom of a storm drain. Not her official phone, which was in pieces in a trash can. But a new phone, a clean one she had picked up at a gas station. The number was blocked. Sarah answered cautiously. "Hello, Major Chen, this is Colonel Patricia Hayes." Sarah sat up immediately. "Colonel, I received your package, along with about 15 other copies from various sources. Very thorough work. Thank you, ma'am. The Inspector General's office has already begun an investigation. Several arrests have been made. We're shutting down the network's operations as we speak." Sarah closed her eyes. "What about Frank Morrison?" "We found him at a safe house in Vermont. He's alive and cooperating with investigators. Apparently he was planning to disappear permanently, but your message convinced him to come in. And my family? Safe. We've placed them under protective custody until we're certain there's no remaining threat." Relief washed over Sarah, so powerful she felt dizzy. "Thank you, Colonel." "Don't thank me, Major. You're the one who broke this case. Frank Morrison laid the groundwork, but you finished it. That took courage." "I just did my job." "You did more than that. You were trapped, compromised, and alone. You had every reason to give up or sell out, but you didn't. That's not just courage, Major, that's character." Sarah's eyes stung with tears she refused to let fall. "What happens now?" Now you come in, we'll debrief you, ensure your safety, and figure out next steps. Your career isn't over, Major Chen, not by a long shot. Colonel, with respect, I'm not sure I want to continue. I'm tired, and I'm not sure I can trust the system anymore." There was a long pause. Then Hayes said, "I understand, and I won't pressure you, but let me say this. What you uncovered proves the system can be corrupted, but it also proves the system can fight back. People like you, like Frank Morrison, like me, we're the antibodies. We're what keeps the corruption from winning." "That sounds exhausting," Hayes laughed. "It is, but it's also the most important work we can do. Think about it, Major, take your time. When you're ready, reach out, we'll be here." The call ended. Sarah sat in the silence of the motel room processing everything. She had accomplished her mission. The leak was stopped. The network was dismantled. Her family was safe. But the price had been steep. Her identity was burned. Her friendships were lies. Even her relationship with her mother had been damaged by the deception. Sarah looked at the photo of her family, the one she had carried through everything. They were smiling, happy, untouched by the darkness she lived in. She wanted to protect that happiness. But she also knew that protection came at a cost. Someone had to stand in the darkness so others could live in the light. Maybe Hayes was right. Maybe that was the most important work of all. Sarah picked up the phone and dialed her mother's new secure number. It rang twice before her mother answered. "Sarah, hi, Mom. Oh, baby, I've been so worried. Are you okay?" "I'm okay, Mom. I'm safe, and I can finally tell you the truth." "The truth? What do you mean?" Sarah took a deep breath. "I never left the army. I've been on a mission, a classified mission, and I couldn't tell you because I had to protect you." Silence. Then quietly, "Tell me everything." So Sarah did. She told her mother about the mission, the danger, the impossible choices. She told her about Frank Morrison and Tom Rodriguez and Margaret. She told her about being trapped, threatened, and having to choose between duty and family. Her mother listened without interrupting, and when Sarah finished, she was crying. "I'm so sorry," Sarah said. "I'm sorry I lied. I'm sorry I made you worry." "Don't apologize," her mother said fiercely. "Don't you dare apologize for protecting us, for doing your job. Sarah, I've always known you were strong, but I had no idea how strong. I'm so proud of you, baby, so incredibly proud." Sarah let the tears fall then, finally allowing herself to feel everything she had been holding back. "I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. Now come home, please, just come home." "I will soon, I promise." After the call ended, Sarah sat in the quiet motel room and allowed herself to feel the full weight of what she had been through. The fear, the anger, the doubt, the determination. She had volunteered for a mission so secret that even her family knew nothing. She had been mocked, underestimated, and dismissed, but she had persevered, she had fought, and she had won. 3 days later, Sarah drove to Washington, D.C., and walked into the Inspector General's office. She was debriefed for 8 hours, answering every question with precision and honesty. When it was over, Colonel Hayes walked her out. "So," Hayes said, "have you thought about what you want to do next?" Sarah looked out at the city, at the people going about their ordinary lives, protected by systems they would never see or understand. "I have," Sarah said. "I'm going to take some time off, spend time with my family, heal. And after that," Sarah smiled, small but genuine, "after that I'm coming back. Because you were right, Colonel. The system needs people who won't give up, who will fight even when it seems hopeless." Hayes nodded approvingly. "Welcome back, Major. When you're ready, we'll have a job waiting for you." 2 weeks later, Sarah stood on the porch of her mother's house, watching the sun set over Philadelphia. Her mother brought out 2 cups of tea and sat beside her. "You're really going back?" her mother asked. "Eventually, but not yet. Right now, I just want to be here, with you and David." Her mother took her hand. "You know, your father would be so proud of you. He always said you were the strongest person he knew." "I don't feel strong," Sarah admitted. "I feel tired and uncertain and a little broken." "That's what makes you strong, baby. You keep going even when you feel that way. Strength isn't about never being afraid or never doubting yourself. It's about moving forward despite those feelings." Sarah leaned her head on her mother's shoulder, watching the sky turn pink and orange. She thought about Frank Morrison, who had sacrificed years of his life to fight a battle no one knew about. She thought about Tom Rodriguez, who had paid the ultimate price for asking questions. She thought about Margaret, whose simple kindness had been a light in the darkness. And she thought about herself, Major Sarah Chen, who had volunteered for an impossible mission and survived. The mission was over. The network was dismantled. Her family was safe. But Sarah knew this was just one battle in a longer war. There would always be people willing to betray their country for money or power. There would always be darkness to fight. And Sarah would be there standing in that darkness protecting the light, because that was what she did. That was who she was, not because she was fearless, not because it was easy, but because someone had to do it, and she had volunteered. 6 months passed. Sarah spent them healing, reconnecting with her family, and slowly rebuilding her sense of self. She went to therapy. She took long walks. Learned to sleep without nightmares. David finished medical school and matched to a prestigious residency. Sarah attended his graduation, sitting in the audience with her mother, clapping until her hands hurt. Afterward, David hugged her tight. "Thanks for being here, sis. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Mom told me what you did, the mission, everything." David pulled back, looking at her seriously. "That was incredibly brave and incredibly stupid." Sarah laughed. "Yeah, it was both of those things. Just promise me something. Next time you decide to save the world, call me first. I worry about you. I promise." It was a promise she knew she might have to break. But for now, standing with her brother and her mother, Sarah allowed herself to enjoy the moment, to be present, to be happy. In July, Sarah received a call from Colonel Hayes. "Major Chen, how's civilian life treating you?" "It's good, Colonel, quiet." "Ready to give up the quiet?" Sarah smiled. "What do you have in mind?" "There's a situation in Berlin. Nothing as dramatic as your last mission, but it requires someone with your particular skill set. Undercover work, intelligence gathering, the usual. Interested?" Sarah looked around her mother's kitchen where she had been helping prepare dinner. It was peaceful, safe, normal, but it wasn't who she was. "When do I leave?" 2 weeks. We'll have a full briefing packet ready for you." After the call ended, Sarah's mother appeared in the doorway. "You're going back?" It wasn't a question. Sarah nodded. "I am." Her mother smiled sadly. "I knew you would. Just promise me you'll be careful." "I promise, Mom. And Sarah, you don't have to prove anything to anyone anymore. You've already proven everything." Sarah hugged her mother tight. "I know this isn't about proving anything. It's about doing what I'm good at, what I believe in. Then go and make us proud, not that you haven't already." 2 weeks later, Sarah boarded a plane to Berlin with a new identity, a new mission, and the same determination that had carried her through Ridgemont. But this time was different. This time she wasn't trying to prove she was strong enough. She knew she was. This time she wasn't alone in the darkness. She had her family's love. She had the respect of her colleagues. She had the knowledge that what she did mattered. And most importantly, she had learned the truth about strength. It wasn't about never falling. It was about standing back up every time you did. Sarah Chen had volunteered for a mission so secret that even her own family knew nothing. She had been tested, threatened, and pushed to her limits. And she had emerged on the other side, not unscathed but unbroken. The plane lifted into the sky, carrying her toward new challenges, new dangers, and new opportunities to make a difference. Sarah looked out the window at the clouds below and allowed herself a small smile. She was ready. The end.